Ever since the emergence and then subsequent mass adoption of social media, there seems to be this perpetual feud. On one side, you've got the old heads of the industry who built their reputations pre-social media. They didn't have to deal with two-way streams of conversation, and a lot of them honestly were probably extraordinarily lucky to get the level of exposure that they did. I guess congratulations to them for being early adopters. Whether we like it or not, all us young coaches do ultimately stand upon their shoulders and gaze off into the future. But this has then seemingly been kicked into overdrive in recent times as we enter a fitness and social media landscape that appears just to be dominated by this reaction-based content. So if you've been living under a rock and you don't know exactly what I'm talking about by now, it's when you just take someone's Instagram reel or something that they've posted on social media and then you green screen it and then you just give your thoughts over the top of it. Now, as a coach who built majority of his reputation online by sharing content themselves, this is a topic that I find particularly interesting. And there were two different coaches on opposing side of the fence that I think had particularly good rants on this subject this week. The first of which is by a really renowned track and field coach, Stu McMillan, sharing his thoughts on the reaction-based era of social media content. And then I don't think it was necessarily a direct response, but I thought it was a really appropriately timed response from a coach that I really look up to, Austin Jochum. So bear with me over the next 3 to 4 minutes as I play back to back first Stu McMillan's take on this whole situation, and then Austin Jochum's. We won't call it a response, but he's definitely a coach from the other side of the fence. And then I have some additional thoughts that I'd like to sort of share with you. Like I said, just as someone who built their reputation and a lot of their business posting social media content, but then also as someone who guides other coaches on their journey to doing the same thing.
All right, a bit of a rant today. Apologies in advance. I usually try to keep my messaging on here positive. Doesn't mean I'm always positive, or that I only think positive thoughts, and anyone who knows me knows that's not the case. Privately, in conversations with colleagues and friends, we talk openly and often critically about what's happening in the world, in our industry, and on social media. It's frustrating, very frustrating often. But there's a difference between private conversations and public contribution. Publicly, I think we can do better. More and more, it feels to me like this space is drifting towards something I struggle to understand or have the ability to defend. We watched it happen on Twitter, if you remember. We all know where that ended. And I don't want to see that same thing happen here. For example, how is watch me react to someone else doing or saying something considered valuable content? I don't get that at all. If you're reacting on video to something another person said or did, without them present, without the chance for dialogue, you're not having a conversation or a debate. You're constructing a one-sided argument. By definition, that's bad faith. It's worse when clips are cherry-picked. It's worse again when the person reacting has a much larger following, because that invites a pile-on. And it's worse still when the person being discussed isn't even on the platform. That's not debate. It's not learning. It's not contribution. And in many cases, all it does is amplify the very ideas or the people being criticized. Is that genuinely where we want to shine our attention? The Seedmans and the Lever Kings of the world rely on our critique to keep their content engaging. Just ignore it. It's not worth your time. It's not what I want to see on Instagram. Hopefully it's not what you want to see here. We can do so much better. This platform just has so much more potential. Share questions you're wrestling with. Share problems you haven't solved yet. Share ideas, exercises, practices, observations, doubts, lessons that you've learned or are learning. And much of this happens, right? And that's the good part of this platform. That's why many of us are still here. Share your work. That's how this space stays useful. Reactionary content built on tearing others down is just stupid. It accelerates the slide towards the same kind of cesspool we've already seen elsewhere. Let's do better. Let's be better.
And now I'll play Austin Jochum's piece of content. Again, we're not going to categorize this as a direct response, but let's just call this some appropriately timed thoughts on the matter.
I want you to think back to the days before social media where we have all these legendary and mystical coaches. A lot of them considered huge inspirations to me and many of us. The Soviets and D.B. Hammers of the world, for example. Articles and books that single-handedly changed the field. But were they geniuses or just early adopters to the information outlets they had at their disposal? Would their stuff survive the scrutiny that you see every day on social media if checked regularly? Or like the Boyles of the world, would they fall apart in any real argument when actually checked by someone because they aren't the sole owners of the information outlet anymore? How legendary would something like the functional patterns cult be considered if they got their stuff out there in a day and age where it wasn't constantly checked? There are a lot of negatives that come from social media, and you hear the argument that coaches today are more focused on it than results. But is that really the case, or is it the fact that now coaches are just constantly checked for said results and methods? Methods that many times don't really live up to the hype they are preached at. Instead of just writing something in a book or article and being eternalized forever, you have to constantly stand up for your ideas and continually prove them, like what science is supposed to be. Coaches that aren't used to this constantly fall back on the appeal to authority arguments and sound like guys that are outdated in the modern world of information, which they are. It doesn't make all these ideas bad or not worthwhile. It's just to say when you read or try some of these older programs out and something doesn't make sense, it might just be because it doesn't make sense, and that's okay. Ideas, philosophies, and methods are all adaptable and should be upgraded. Or when you read something about a coach with magic eyes and powers and don't see anything as mystical today, it might have a lot less to do with the loss of magic and a lot more to do with the fact that said magic is put to the test in an open form constantly. And what we find over and over again is not that the magic is gone, but that it probably wasn't there in the first place, which is awesome, because then it gives us all the power to have these magic powers if developed and crafted. The point of standing on giants is to become one yourself, not to plant your feet firmly in the past. And sometimes you end up looking like a really big fish when your pond is tiny. Keep chopping wood.
So while I'm pretty biased and I definitely lean towards Austin Jochum's side of the fence, I'm not here to disrespect Stu McMillan. I genuinely do think he's a legend of the game and sort of give my thoughts on where I think he got some things right. But I sort of think, overwhelmingly, a lot of these coaches that were really successful and put out industry-changing works, whether it was through books or even just on blogs prior to the emergence of social media. What's really interesting is we don't really get to hear from a lot of their peers that weren't as successful in building these really large public reputations, because at the end of the day, communication pathways weren't nearly as democratized or equalized as they are these days by social media. So ultimately, what a lot of these old heads are now finding out is what people actually think of their ideas, whereas before, they really only got feedback from the people who were coming to their seminars, buying their products, or reading their books. And I honestly don't really appreciate this holier-than-thou attitude of some of the old heads of the industry that show their face on social media, because if social media is such a problem with the field, just delete your accounts. Like, if your reputation is so much bigger than social media, delete your account. And the ironic thing about these coaches is whenever they do want to respond to something and get the biggest audience possible, ultimately they use social media. They don't go open up their old blog or they don't publish another book. So it just seems to be a bit hypocritical to have the main channel of your business being social media and then trying to rinse all these apparent social media coaches. And prior to social media, this is why we did have so many gurus back in the day, because it was so hard to challenge, from anything from the really cooked to the just slightly wrong ideas that we sort of perceive when people put out these work. And I think ultimately what a lot of these old coaches are mourning is just this perception that they were untouchable, and nowadays just some coach who doesn't even have their qualifications and has never trained a client in real life can call them out on their bullshit, and that can be hard to take. But I think the scary thing is, in the information age, just like how often these people calling out these old heads in their reaction content are more often than not right. Just because they're being mean or we don't necessarily agree with their communication style, a lot of the time these floating head videos are making really good points, and a lot of older coaches just can't handle that level of scrutiny or accountability. And now where my views more align with what Stu is talking about is more just as a fan of content consumption and a fan of consuming fitness content in general. Like, this reaction-based content is such a dominant strategy in the current meta of social media. It's like all you see from some coaches, and that in a sense, like, it does just get boring at a certain point. Not hearing any of anyone's genuine opinions or original thoughts on training, all they're doing is tearing things down, because ultimately this type of content is, and I'll explain why in a second, it's not necessarily the best form of content creation for growing your business and acquiring customers, but it is completely overpowered when it comes to engagement and building up a following. So I studied journalism at university, and something that gets brought up all the time is the use of the negativity bias. People or humans are so much more geared to pay attention to negative information than positive information. So all this built-in drama you get by responding to other people's content and creating all this negativity or conflict, it's just an incredible engagement strategy at the end of the day. In fact, it's so overpowered as a social media engagement strategy that's why nowadays you're seeing all these coaches with 30, 50, 70 plus, even maybe 100,000 followers. Literally all their videos are them just criticizing the work and content of other coaches. They haven't put out a single piece of original content being like, oh, hey, here's how I think you should program a workout. Hey, here's how I think you should do this exercise, without leveraging someone else's hook. A lot of the time as well, part of the reason that you're responding to a particular clip is because it's already gone viral, and that's how it ended up in your feed in the first place. So rather than coming up with your own hook, you're just leveraging someone else's viral content, which is why they just almost always go off. You've got the original piece of content, which is viral in its own right, with the added rush of negativity and conflict, which just gets people so engaged. At the end of the day, when you're looking to hire a coach or a mentor or an educator in this field, a lot of the reason why people don't actually reach out to people is fear of judgment. Reaching out to another coach for help or soliciting their service, it's an act of vulnerability. You're reaching out, you're like, hey, I need your help with this. And if you're the kind of coach that has built your entire reputation only by criticizing other people and never by being vulnerable yourself and sharing some of your own cute or weird takes on training, then the odds are that 99% of people are never gonna wanna hire you as a coach, because how it plays out in their head is they're gonna be worried about asking you for help or asking too dumb of a question, and they're just thinking about all the judgment that they're going to receive for asking a simple question or needing your help in the first place. Okay, so here's where I think that this content genuinely fits in a coherent content strategy that's actually going to build you not just a following of onlookers, but also people who are going to hire you as a coach or buy your products and develop trust in you as an authority as well, not just someone who's tearing other people down. So typically when we're developing a content strategy, we're thinking about three main forms of content, and that is our top of funnel content, our middle funnel content, and then our bottom funnel content. The simplest way to explain it is top of funnel content is predominantly designed to increase your following and make people realize you exist. The middle funnel content is then nurturing that relationship with your existing following, and then the bottom of funnel content is essentially the sales process and converting those people that trust you a little bit more into your customers. For the purposes of this conversation, we're really only going to talk about top and middle funnel content, because once you've got someone that far down the bottom of the funnel that they're considering being a customer, it's basically just letting people know that you have things to buy, and if they've gone hard enough through the top and middle funnel, a lot of those people will be ready to make a purchase. And so once you become aware of these three stages to the funnel, then it's pretty easy to troubleshoot your own content strategy, because you just look at what your weakest area is. Are you having trouble making sales? Are you having trouble keeping your followers who become aware of you engaged? Or does no one even know you exist? The latter is the position that majority of coaches on social media find themselves in. They have no followers to even keep engaged, let alone even try to sell and convert into customers. So this is the sort of coach that should honestly be looking to bias more of the top of funnel style of content. You don't want to neglect the middle and bottom funnel entirely, but most of your effort and your biggest weakness will be just making people aware that you exist. And this reaction-based green screen clapback content is absolutely phenomenal for that. There's just no way around it. It's one of the easiest ways to make people aware you exist, to make some noise, call out some of the big dogs in the industry, and take your shot at the title. And this is another personal bias where I sort of do more line up with Stuart McMillan's take on things. If I'm ever going to directly respond or call out another coach or use some of their content as a green screen, I always try to make sure it's someone who has a much bigger following than mine. I accidentally put a coach on blast that had 1,000 or 2,000 followers. I didn't realize it was a super viral piece of content that they made, but I absolutely hammered the bloke, and it didn't really feel good for me. Even if you think this coach has said something really shitty, at the end of the day, if they don't have a big account, then they're not consistently reaching that many people. Having said that, if it's an account with hundreds of thousands of followers, I think it's open season, especially if you genuinely believe they're putting out toxic or harmful information, which honestly isn't that hard to find in your algorithm these days. The fitness industry is an absolute mess. So always trying to punch up always trying to make sure it's genuinely bad information that you're responding to. And I would never let this become more than 20 to 30% of your total content strategy. Otherwise, you're going to fall into that engagement trap where, yeah, you've got a lot of people who are tuning into your content every single day, but all they're interested in is seeing you tear people down. They're never going to reach out to you for help, and they're never going to buy anything from you. And if you are someone that just loves doing this reaction-based content, it doesn't have to be restricted to just tearing people down. There are so many coaches putting out amazing training tips, amazing training content. You can green screen over someone's reel who's doing a good job and just explain all the reasons why you agree with them and why more people should be seeing that sort of content. As much as we've discussed how humans just have this natural attraction to the negativity bias, being positive on social media, especially with the green screen effect, can be very palate cleansing and catch people off guard as well. But the critical step the majority of coaches who lean into this negative reaction-based content often miss is just a complete neglect of the middle funnel, showing up, being vulnerable, putting your own ideas out into the world, and again, giving someone else the opportunity to clap back at you and tear all your things apart. It's an extremely necessary part of the process because not only does it make you a complete, well-rounded person, but at the end of the day, it's this vulnerability and this openness and sharing that's going to make other people actually feel comfortable reaching out to you for help. And that's such a critical part of being able to build a business, no matter how good your content is or how much engagement it's getting. People need to trust you, and people need to feel safe being vulnerable around you and asking you for help. This just doesn't happen if you're only tearing other people down. One of the other things as well that Stu brought up in his post is just this idea that we're giving free exposure to functional movement cults like, functional patterns or Goda. This idea that people wouldn't know about them if people weren't green screening and reacting to their videos. I think that's complete nonsense because a lot of these functional movement cults or people who put out terrible fitness information, they're phenomenal content creators. They're so good at developing hooks and things like that. And again, they're leaning into this negativity bias so much that you can't do traditional training. You've got to move in spirals. Oh, you're neglecting your fascia. Again, they're all taking advantage of the negativity bias. They're all green screening people who are doing traditional S&C as well. So no one's really safe from this reaction-based content. I can't tell you how many times someone's come up to me in public, at the gym, at an event, or just at the pub and told me about how they were into some sort of functional movement cult, and it was seeing my content, green screening these people, explaining why these cults are stupid, that actually got them out of it and got them thinking more clearly about training. So this idea that it's free publicity for the coaches you don't like, I think that's absolute nonsense. At the end of the day, it's good to dispel shitty information and to try to put people onto better forms of training. Anyway, there's my thoughts on reaction-based content. If you are a coach who's interested in building a brand through social media and trying to get more customers, or you just want to put more of your opinions on training out there and you want help navigating that process, that's exactly what I do for a whole bunch of coaches who've built online businesses and online brands from the ground up. So check out the links down below, hop into GPP level 1, and I can hold your hand through that entire process. I can take you from someone who's never done a post on Instagram all the way up to, being able to decide how much you want to work in person, or if that's even something you want to do. Living a bit of the laptop lifestyle. And at the end of the day, I'm just passionate about good content creation and sharing great ideas on training and occasionally shitting on other people for terrible takes on training. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. There should be some suggestions for a couple of other videos from my channel that you might like up here. And if not, I will see you in a couple of days with another video.